me your thoughts about men at midlife.
Sure. I don't have anything to compare it to. I find that I've been kind of a crisis junkie my whole life. I've lived on the edge. I was driving fast cars and that sort of thing at 20, and I'm doing that now. I dated a lot my whole life. I was doing rock and roll at 20 years old. I'm doing rock and roll now. I really don't have anything to compare it to. There's a good possibility that I am experiencing it, but my life has been such up until 2.5 years ago that I never really slowed down. I'm probably slower now than I've ever been. So if I were to say anything, I would say that my life is mellowing more now.
Welcome back. I wanted to, I know this person was willing to share the fact that his life has always been at a pretty quick pace and still sees himself in some ways as he did many years ago. And that reminded me of the stereotypes that I opened the show with, this idea about running out and getting a sports car and a younger wife. And I'm wondering if this idea of perpetual youth ever does show up in the kind of work that you do.
Sure. I see a lot of men who have a younger image of themselves than, probably 10 years younger, like Gail Sheehy says in New Passages. She has interviews with those kind of men. There's a lot of men that see themselves a lot younger, including myself. I have a hard time seeing myself as old as I am, 44. And,
okay.
A lot of them, it ranges, they're 10, 12 years younger in their own mental image.
Okay. And what kinds of things get your attention? How do you know when you're 44? What brings
when I'm next to Gary.
Hey, watch it.
I picked up a book, Fear of 50, and it's more for women, but, thinking about the show and thinking about this whole thing, I started thinking, well, what do I want to accomplish by the time I'm 50? And what have I done in my life? And it was good just to even think about it. And I think that's true for a lot of people. They are rushing around like that man we saw there, busy in their lives, and they don't stop and get quiet and think about what direction they're going.
Okay. So we may find themselves on a course that may, at some level, not even be of their own choosing, but just sort of, they got in a stream of things and moving along, and then maybe something happens that pulls the brakes on that. And I think you were alluding to that before.
Exactly. I find men are so busy with their careers, working 60 to 80 hours a week, that they don't have the luxury to focus on where they're going until some crisis hits, like there's a layoff or a reorganization, or they're burnt out. And then they realize that they're not 20 years old, they don't have the choices they had before, and they have to reassess their whole life. Or quite often what happens to bring men into therapy is the women who say, I'm tired of being married to Joe, he works 80 hours a week and I never see him. And there's the crisis, there's the evaluation, and that could come, as I said earlier, in his 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. But most of the time we don't have the luxury of assessment.
Okay.
And that, as you said, we're pulled along in a stream of things and then finally realize through a crisis that, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, something gets our attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of relationships being a stimulus, sort of somebody in the family saying, oh, this isn't working for me, or even, often I will see the other half of this equation, which is I see the wife in this scenario who comes in and is feeling distraught because she doesn't, perhaps he's going through an evaluation of his own and she's not sure where she's going to fit in with that, and does that mean that they're going to be separated, and that kind of fear that comes up, I think, for the partner as well during this period of time of, who is this person I'm married to, and if he's going to want to go off and maybe fulfill a dream he's always had, does that mean I get to come too, or not? And I'm not sure. In terms of the work you do with the men, do you also do couples counseling?
Sure.
Yes.
You do?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you do get to have input from the women involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, when I'm working with a man, at some point I always ask for the wife to come in, or the girlfriend, so that I get a sense of how they are in relationship and get more information.
That certainly does provide a different perspective,
Absolutely.
doesn't it? Let's take a look at another graphic with an issue that may come up for you. Coping skills. Tackling real issues and help you to find real solutions. Mr. Carr has a strong network of friends and giving expression to our thoughts and feelings. So, you know, part of, I know the fear that the women will come in with is that he's going to find some sort of fantasy solution, like a sports car or like another woman, to maybe address this spiritual or painful crisis that he may be facing. And so part of that has to do maybe with sitting down with the men and saying, you know, what are the real options here, I would guess. Because I think it's normal in that kind of crisis to want to find some sort of quick solution or find some way out of this difficult time.
Yeah, that's, again, a good reason to include the partner. Is let's work on this, let's talk about this together so that it's not a crisis in relationship, so it doesn't fall over into the relationship.
Okay, and in fact, that maybe she could provide be part of that support network. Now, attending your groups and things like that, I believe you both have been affiliated with another organization, the Nation of Men, and I think that provides a way for men to actually develop the support system they may not have, working 70, 80 hours a week.
Right. You know, men meet in groups. We're in a men's group together. We meet once a week for a couple hours, and we tell what's going on in our lives. You know, and the men in the Nation of Men are all in individual groups too that meet usually once a week, and they use that as a place to support each other and to, you know, identify with each other's issues, to confront each other, to deal with a lot of the things that they would normally look at.
Okay, so do you find that might be more difficult for men sometimes to form that support network?
It's very difficult for men to do that. I think it's becoming easier and easier, but it wasn't accepted in the past. If men gathered, there was an element of danger, you know, because what are those men up to? So I don't think it's been very well accepted, but you're seeing it more and more, and hopefully it'll be easier as time goes
But once
by.
they're in a group, they usually enjoy it. You know, usually they can open up a lot more.
Well, I think we're seeing a cultural reinterest in them. I mean, we had the gathering in Washington of the 1,000 Men March. I can't remember.
Million
Man. There you go. I knew there was a number involved in that. Okay, Million Man, and then we also have seen, I believe there's a Christian organization of gatherings of men that are meeting on a regular basis in different cities, doing this you know, recommitment. What are the Promise Keepers?
Right.
The recommitment to family and those kind of values. So it seems like at some level this is something where men are beginning to say, you know, perhaps we can be a resource instead of a source of competition and exclusion.
I think there's a lot of fear amongst men to connect with other men too because of the competition, and you know, I think that is why group works more than any other reason, is providing a safe place for men to meet. There's not competition, where men can share their feelings and feel that it's confidential.
Okay.
It's kind of like individual therapy in a sense too. Is good for the empathy and for a safe place for a man to look inside and explore himself, you know, and then be more empathic with his wife.
Well, and you know, I think about some of the couples I know. I mean, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the couples I work with are usually led by the woman in the sense that she's the one that gets them involved into therapy. I mean, there's a few exceptions to that, but it's often so. You know, for men to actually seek out these kind of groups and these kinds of therapy, how often are they prompted by their women, and how often still
Pretty
in your
often,
situation too?
Yeah.
Okay, where she suggests that maybe he could
I'd say
do
probably
with some
70%
support.
of the time.
Okay. But they stick it out, you know, they really do. And my experience is that once men do get into, like you said, a safe place to talk, even in a couple session, they do continue to come. It's that initial sort of hesitancy about what's this sharing thing going to be about.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's take a look at our next issue, which has to do with individual needs. Developing the parts of us contained in our dreams, thoughts we never expressed, actions we never took, love we didn't give, and love we didn't receive. So maybe getting in touch with the parts of us that we have not developed, that have been maybe more dormant. Or I was thinking when I read this book about old dreams that maybe had been held at one time in high school or college and then just sort of got put away somewhere because of the demands of life.
That's where I find the vision quest is incredibly helpful again, because men go away, they can separate from all the stimulus around them, and they get quiet enough to look at what is my passion, and that's one of the questions that I ask them. I had a man who did 2 vision quests with me. He did one on his own, and he's been sailing around the Pacific for the last 2 years. That was his passion. He freed himself up to do that. Another man came back and said, I don't want to do electronics anymore. I want to go to cooking school. So, you know, it's pretty amazing.
Well, and I think it's wonderful to have the opportunity to make a shift like that. You know, that we actually do have those kind of choices. I think it seems to me that most of the barrier is our fear as opposed to
Absolutely.
actual
That's the
life.
whole idea, is to break through your fears.
And a lot of it is just facing that fear. You know, men don't like fear. They'd
No.
rather be angry or feel some other emotion.
Or control it in some way.
Yeah, and if they
Yeah.
can stay with it, you know, and make space for that fear and face it, it makes a big difference. It shifts. Yeah.
How often do men go, they come up against a crisis and they decide to leave their life as it is? And have you ever had that experience where somebody takes a look at it and says, you know what, I like my family like it is. I kind of like electronics. You know, I kind of like the fact I have 2.5 kids in a station wagon, and that's really okay with me.
Yeah. And sometimes it's that other issue from childhood that's an unfinished business. You know, it's something with their family dynamics. It's somehow that they were stuck in a role or looked at. And then when they get a sense of their real identity, it doesn't matter as much what they're doing in roles or other things. Or sometimes they get more committed. You know, they get
Okay.
more
They can work
recommitted.
the other way.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was wondering about, a recommitment to your life as opposed to
Mhm.
maybe going off and becoming a chef. Okay.
And maybe they bring in some hobbies. Maybe they spend some time in a men's group. You know, maybe they shift their life in a different kind of way. And as we're talking about, the networking, the connection with other people is what's really vital, men and women. And there's a real need for co-ed groups. I used to do a couple co-ed groups. And the energy that comes from that is really wonderful.
I think it is a marvelous opportunity. I know in my life when I have had the opportunity to sit with men and hear their concerns and actually to become acquainted with the similarities. You know, I think what happens so often is a focus on the differences and, you know, how men think like this and women think like that, and absolutely there's a difference. I mean,
Sure.
there are, and this is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But there still is room for the fact that we, you know, pain is, in my experience, pain is pain.
Right.
You know, and being able to sit with a man who's expressing what's going on with him is very powerful for most women. I mean, a lot of women have never seen a man cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
You know?
frightening for a lot of women.
Yeah.
You know, at times, you know, they have a hard time seeing their man cry, and the man picks that up and he holds it in. And breaking through that barrier where the woman can tolerate it and trust the man can handle his pain is
Yeah.
great.
No, you're right. I think, you know, there's often we'll say we really want him to communicate, we really want this, and then when they do, it's like, oh, wait a second, no, you weren't supposed to communicate that. You know, you weren't supposed to share that feeling with
Well,
me.
and that's why the men's groups are helpful sometimes, because the men can support each other, they can know each other's pain, and they can tolerate it, and the other man knows that they can tolerate it.
Right.
And then they vent it a little and release it enough where they can go back to their spouse or whoever.
Right, and not have to worry about the protective factor. We're going to need to close. I want to thank you both for being with us and
Thank you.
spending some time addressing this issue.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. In the upcoming weeks, we'll look at divorce recovery and resilient children. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.